Hey there. If you're the one who notices problems before anyone else does, this is for you. You're the one who sees things first. The tension in the room, the teacher sleeping who just might quit. You're already tracking the consequences. Who will be upset? Who will push back? So even on days that look fine or feel calm, your body doesn't fully stand down. You go to sleep tired and you wake up already bracing. Not because today is chaotic or any day is chaotic, but because something could go wrong. And you know you'll be the one that's holding it. It's the responsibility that can sometimes feel crushing. You stay alert, reliable, and steady because you've seen what happens when things aren't held, when communications slip, when standards soften, when everyone assumes someone else will step in. And because you're so good at holding it, more of it finds its way to you, quietly, gradually, until no one sees how heavy it's become. This is not burnout, and this is not a discipline problem. It's what I call the invisible weight of leadership. If you see yourself in this, or even if your breath changed just a little bit, that's enough. And if you want to keep going and learn more, the opening chapter of my book, This Can't Be Normal, What to Do When Success Starts to Feel Like Survival. My book continues this conversation. You can go ahead and download chapter 1 for free and continue this dialogue.
Why does building a bigger team often make leaders feel so much more alone? Is one of the questions that I asked as I'm exploring the writing of my book, This Can't Be Normal. What to do when success starts to feel like survival. Because when leaders would come speak with me, they had already hired more people and built bigger teams and delegated and created all the systems. And so on paper, everything really made sense. But even as the team got bigger and their payroll grew and the org chart grew, somehow the loneliness grew also. And I don't subscribe to this concept of it's lonely at the top because I actually think that can't be normal. That's one of the reasons why I wrote my book, This Can't Be Normal. Because at 50 employees or 100 employees or 500 employees, if you're still responsible for everything, that means no one's actually carrying the weight with you. Because, again, you're going to have different conversations, you're going to have different problems, different financial concerns, different culture issues, but the experience is still the same. Why do I feel more alone now than when I was doing everything myself, right? Because when you're doing everything yourself, the loneliness makes sense. But when there are 50 people around you, okay, and you're still the only adult in the room, which means you're still the emotional and operational backstop, that when the stakes matter, you're the only person that step in. This is like the greatest paradox of leadership, right? I write it in my opening of my book, This Can't Be Normal. I write that leadership is a living, breathing paradox where opposites collide and you're asked to hold both without breaking. That's leadership, right? We want these neat and binary answers, but that's not real leadership. It's performance leadership or theater, as I like to call it, right? Because a bigger team doesn't automatically create shared responsibility. It creates the illusion of shared responsibility. And those are not the same thing, okay? You have an ownership problem. It's not about I want a cohesive team or I want this. It's ownership. Everyone is very busy. Everyone is participating. Everyone is contributing. But very few people actually own things, okay? Because if you're still checking, anticipating, preparing for what happens if nobody notices, then you are alone in your business. And what's really difficult is schools actually reward this, okay? The leader becomes the safety net. You become the recovery plan. You become the quality control department, right? Everyone trusts you. And I had a call last week with an owner and she's like, I built a team so I wouldn't have to carry this. And now I'm also carrying the team too, right? This is why I always say, like, delegation isn't the finish line. Ownership is. Those are very different outcomes, right? Delegation moves the task. Here, do this task. Ownership moves the responsibility. Okay, so think about it like this. Delegation is like, can you do this? I'd really appreciate if you did this. You need to be in charge of this. Ownership is, this belongs to you. It belongs to you, right? You don't want fewer tasks or whatever it is. You want relief from the invisible weight of leadership. That is what you want relief from. And this is why it doesn't matter how big your company is. So many leaders are still very, very alone because they're missing the infrastructure of what it takes to install ownership inside of the company. And ownership happens, right? Real infrastructure has 4 parts. And it's what I talk about all the time on my podcast, in Schools of Excellence, in our membership. Standard. What is the standard in this company, right? And you need standards in all the different gears of your business, right? So there are 5 core gears that every single school is always working on: enrollment, staff culture, parent engagement, financial health, and strategic growth. Those are the 5 things that every school is always working on. Every single activity in your school lines up to one of those 5 things. Every single one of those gears needs standards. What are the standards for enrollment in our school? Who owns it? What are the rhythms? Meaning, when do they predictably, reliably, and consistently return to those rhythms? Not, oh my God, it's enrollment season, we have to. No. When do you do this mood proof? It doesn't matter if you don't authentically feel like calling the parent at 9 o'clock in the morning. You call them anyways, because that's your follow-up rhythm. Because someone toured yesterday, and in our school, the standard is we follow up 24 hours later. So you make the phone call at 9. Not make the phone call at 9 if you're not short-staffed. That's not what the standard says. The standard says make the follow-up call at 9. Which means you need to do it predictably, reliably, and consistently. Now, people say, well, what if I can't? Well, that is an infrastructure issue. That's an infrastructure issue. If someone can't do the standard because you're short-staffed, that means you don't have standards. Standards need to exist irrelevant of what's happening inside of the organization. If you can only do things on perfect days, then you don't have a company. You have a wish and a prayer and a hope and whatever. And then you wonder why it's so stressed out all the time, because you don't have infrastructure. Standard, ownership, rhythm, response is the 4th part. What is the consequence? What happens when someone doesn't do the standard? So what happens at 9 o'clock when they didn't call and they give you their excuse of the morning, whatever flavor it is today? We were short-staffed. It was this. Someone had a bug. Someone had a this. Someone's car was towed. Blah, blah, blah. It was raining. I couldn't get my car out. I got stuck on Tanky Taffy. I don't know. Fill in the excuse, right? What is the consequence? What happens when someone doesn't do what the standard is, right? And most owners look at me blankly and they're like, I don't know, what do you want me to do? Fire them? I'm like, again, if your only consequence to someone not doing the standard is firing, you will never, ever install a consequence, because it's not about firing people, right? It's the same thing as with parenting, right? Firing is the equivalent of threats and bribes. If your parenting strategy is threats and bribes, good luck, right? But you actually need other infrastructure inside of a home, which are values, which are standards, which is ownership, which is rhythm, which are natural consequences to what happens. And consequence isn't punishment. And I write about that in chapter 17 of my book. It's predictable safety. Consequence isn't punishment. It's predictable safety. But we don't have good vernacular and a language of what consequence is, because this industry for years has been obsessed with write-ups, HR, or whatever it is. That's not a consequence. The HR is not part of your consequence infrastructure. HR is about protecting the company's assets and protecting the company's, brand or whatever it is, reputation. It is not about the consequence of what happens when you didn't follow up when you said you were supposed to follow up. There will always be a reason why you can't do something. Okay? And if you live in a world where you believe that one day you are not going to have any disruptions and there's going to be no interruptions, and then you're going to be able to do your job, you will never do your job. You will never, ever, ever do your job, because there's always a reason why you can't do it today. Welcome to working in childcare, moving targets. Okay? You have kids, you have parents, you have teachers, you have the cleaning crew, you have the licensing people that come in, you have the mayor, you have the governor, you have all these people that impact you. Now you can look at it and be like, oh, you see, I have no control. No, that is being a victim of your circumstances. You can also say, what do I actually have agency over? What do I actually have agency over? I just had a conversation last week with someone who's being audited by the IRS for something, and she felt like she had zero agency, right? Like, you think IRS is like, oh my God, blah, blah, you have to like do whatever they say. And I'm not saying don't follow what the IRS says. You listen, okay? However, she was completely abdicating all agency that she actually had over what was going on. Okay, and I understand. Being audited is scary. I'm not denying that factor, taking away that part of the reality. The problem is she was only looking at one part of the reality. There is another part of the reality, which is her own agency, which is her own influence over what can happen, which is her own stewardship of the company and what action she can actually take. And once I helped her restore agency in herself, she was able to actually see what action she could take and what she can do moving forward. And so when we talk about why does a bigger team create loneliness, it's you weren't hiring the team to actually take away and create shared partnership and shared leadership and shared responsibility. You were giving people tasks. And when we give people tasks, they actually don't take ownership because, and I know this sounds so counterintuitive, but the more responsibility you give people, the more they actually step up. And in this industry, there is this really pervasive thought of like, I don't want to overwhelm my teachers. I don't want to give them any more than they have. I don't want them to, be responsible for this. They're doing me such a big favor that they already showed up. Okay, you're missing what actually creates meaning in life. Meaning comes from hard work. Meaning comes from engaging and having contact with the process. That's where meaning comes. When you labor on something, that is when you love that thing, not when everything is just handed to you. And we know this intellectually, but we're not doing an embodiment of this inside of our centers. And we're doing a massive disservice to our staff. We keep robbing them of the ability to actually create connection and meaning inside of the company because we take it all for ourselves. We hold all of the hard work. No, your people actually want to come in contact with hard work. They do not grow from endless coaching, reminding, training, motivation, or since all of these things, they don't grow from that. They grow from coming in contact with their comfort zone, with coming in contact with their growth edge and pushing past there. That's what happens. That is when you can actually start shifting away from all of the invisible weight and the cost of that weight and actually start stepping into what it means to really lead and have partnership inside of your company.